I was Hanny Usher, Rico from RicoScores, and you already knew we were coming with the Day 6 training camp breakdown of what happened in the 2024 Washington Commanders training camp practice. Again, this is Day 6. This is Day 2 of the pads being on. A lot happened today. A lot of good, but also some bad. Again, y'all know I'm going to keep it 100 with y'all, so any good or bad, even if it's from the same player, like Jayden Daniels wasn't perfect today, but he went crazy. A lot of people are saying this was his best day of the offseason so far, at the very least training camp. Frankie Luvu looked like a future all-pro out there today. Johnny Newton is now back working with the actual team, not just doing drills on the side, but actually in 11-on-11s. Even the Pivot podcast pulled up with their people. You have Ryan Clark and those guys. Jamin Davis, we have him doing some edge rusher drills. We have some clips of that. We're getting a starting offensive line going right now. There's some competition still, but we're starting to kind of see what the starting offensive line may look like for week 1 of the regular season. Dan Quinn also highlighted some standouts from the first padded practice yesterday, what went down Monday, and he also talked about some of the highlights from today as well. We're going to dive into all that and more, but before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content. I really appreciate y'all for pulling up to every video, supporting every video, leaving a like on every video, leaving comments, all kinds of stuff, man. I really appreciate the love. Y'all do not understand how much it means to me, so I really appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all stay tuned for every single training camp practice. Again, anytime that they practice and we have any access to it, I'm gonna give you the clips like I'm gonna show y'all today, like I've shown y'all in every other training camp practice. And of course, we're doing a full breakdown of every position group every single time, starting with the quarterbacks all the way through the offense, through the defense, and even special teams as well. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this video instead of wasting even more of y'all time. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so even before practice officially started, of course, I got to show y'all what the scene looks like, provided by Jayden. Per usual, and today was a season ticket holder and sponsor only event. Not just any old fans could walk up like they could in yesterday's practice. Again, today was season ticket holders and sponsors only. And of course, when we're talking about the first guy to practice, we already know Day 6, it had to be Bryson Tremaine once again. Shouts out to Mitch Tisler for still keeping up with this every single day. It's been Bryson Tremaine 5 out of the 6 days. The one time Bryson Tremaine, the wide receiver, was not the first player out at practice was the day that Jayden Daniels and Sam Hartman were the first ones. But when it's Bryson Tremaine that's first, which has been the case for 5 out of 6 days, Jayden Daniels and Sam Hartman, I believe, are right behind them, second and third, neck and neck, right next to each other. Also, like I mentioned in the intro, Ryan Clark and the Pivot crew were at the training camp today as well. And I believe Ryan Clark and Joe Wood Jr. are pretty close, so I'm pretty sure they even chopped it up a little bit. And maybe we have an upcoming episode on the way. We'll see what happens there. Then you also have Jonathan Allen and Dan Quinn as my boy Josh Taylor. Make sure you follow him, subscribe to him, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere. He pointed out the fact that Jonathan Allen and Dan Quinn were talking to Ryan Clark for a while. So maybe they're going to be included in the episode, even though I'm just personally assuming that they are mostly there for Jayden Daniels. I'm just assuming. Don't know for sure, but I put money on the fact that Jayden Daniels will be the star of whatever episode they were working on today. You may even see some of the clips from some of the throws that he made in practice, like one I'm going to show you at some point. But then again, I don't think that this team wants people to have access to the actual tape of what's going on in practice. People can tweet about what's happening, but they're trying to shut down a lot of the actual team drill footage. You can see a lot of the things, you can upload clips about what's happening in individual drills, but team drill wise, I don't think we'll see much from the Pivot podcast unless they just get some special permission to do it today. Who knows? But either way, I mean, Jayden Daniels was already on their show when he was there to support Brandon Ayuk when he was talking about his dispute with the 49ers and potentially holding out, requesting a trade and all of that type of stuff on their show weeks ago. So I'm pretty sure they're just here to follow up on Jayden Daniels so that he can talk about his Commanders rather than just kind of being the sidekick to Brandon Ayuk in his situation. Then also before practice started, Terry McLaurin, of course, doing everything that he can before the practice even starts, giving his gloves away to some kids before the practice even started. He's always pulling up and giving away some type of merch. That's just fantastic stuff from Terry McLaurin, one of the faces of the franchise. That, I mean, it's not necessarily what you expect, but it's just so fantastic that that's something that he makes sure he does every single day. And then also, you had Josh Harris there at training camp. This was his first time attending a training camp so far this offseason. He was watching the practice with Mitchell Rails and general manager Adam Peters as well. Apparently, Bob Myers was out there too. And then once practice actually started, you had Adam Peters and Josh Harris watching like behind the fans, like further up in the stands. So they were watching practice just like everybody else was that was out there. And there was even a funny moment that Josh Taylor pointed out where a fan told Josh Harris to go get Brandon Ayuk, and then he just simply pointed to Adam Peters. That's it. I don't even believe he said a single word out loud. Just pointed to Adam Peters like, hey, direct your attention to that guy. That's not my call. Which is, first of all, hilarious, but secondly, most importantly, the fact that this is actually Adam Peters' show, it just goes to show that this is like literally, he's handling the football side. Josh Harris is on the business side. Yeah, he owns the team, but he's not meddling. He's not micromanaging. He's not overstepping his boundaries. If we go and get Brandon Ayuk, it will be because Adam Peters wanted to do so, not because of Josh Harris. But I just thought that it was interesting that even the fact that he pointed to Adam Peters, maybe it sounds like Josh Harris does want him. But again, even if Josh Harris wants him, if Adam Peters doesn't, if the trade price isn't right, or for whatever reason they don't want to, then that means that they won't, which shows that Adam Peters is in fact running the football side of everything. I love it. Now moving on to the injury update before we get into what happened in practice. Johnny Newton will get work today. He ended up getting work, and Dan Quinn even said before practice that he was excited to see it. So Johnny Newton was out there for team drills for the first time all offseason, not just training camp, but the entire offseason. Ever since we drafted him, we have not seen him do anything outside of just being on the side of the field. And rookie mini camps, he was like just kind of standing there with a boot on. Then voluntary OTAs, he was kind of working on a treadmill a little bit. Same thing with mandatory mini camps, off to the side on the treadmill. And then up to this point, the first 5 days of training camp, he was like doing individual drills. Today was the first time that we actually saw him out there 11 on 11s going against offensive linemen in a blocking scenario, having to go make a play against a running back or a quarterback or whatever. And Mitch Tisley even pointed out the fact that Newton was doing work post practice, beating double teams yesterday afternoon on the side field. So even at the end of practice yesterday, leading up to today, when he finally participated in team drills for the first time all off season, he was looking like that he was doing a pretty good job beating double teams and everything. Mitch Tisley said he looked quick and maybe even more importantly, unencumbered by his foot injury. That is big news. This guy sounds like he's pretty much 100% and ready to go. And then lastly, the only negative injury update that we have is that Commanders cornerback Benjamin St-Juste participated in individual drills, but then after that just went inside. He was not out there for team drills. I don't know what the injury is, but apparently maybe they just wanted to see if he could go. Maybe something happened towards the end of last practice yesterday. Then they used individual drills today to kind of gauge where he is health-wise, and then they just figured it wasn't really worth it, so they just let him chill, I guess, for the rest of the day. Who knows? But I'm not exactly sure what happens with players when they go inside. Do they do their own little separate drills, separate from everybody else, away from the media to see inside like the bubble? I don't know. But either way, Benjamin St-Juste was not out there with the team. Maybe nothing major, but something significant enough for him to actually miss practice today. So of course, we're going to talk about, when we get to the defensive back part of this video, who started in his place. Who were the starting two corners with Benjamin St-Juste out today in practice. Now, before we actually get to practice again, you know Dan Quinn had a few things to say before practice, and there's always something very interesting coming from it. Always some quotable that I could probably do an entire video on separately. So he recapped the first day of pads of what happened yesterday. He specifically highlighted John Bates's blocking on offense, on defense Jonathan Allen and Dorrance Armstrong, and then special teams Casimir Allen and Mike Sanford still in the return game. Those were the only 5 players that he just went out of his way to emphasize that once we put the pads on, these guys really stood out in their respective areas. Again, offense, John Bates is blocking, defense, Jonathan Allen and Dorrance Armstrong on the defensive line, and then special teams, Casimir Allen and Mike Sanford still. So these guys are pads on all-stars apparently. These are guys that you can't really measure and gauge how impactful they are to the team until you're out there with pads and actually hitting. And it sounds like these guys are finally, well, not even finally, because Jonathan Allen and a lot of those guys, even Dorrance Armstrong at times, was already making plays in training camp, but now that the pads are on, they're really starting to stand out, apparently. Then Felix Trammell pointed out the fact that he asked Dan Quinn about where he thinks the rookies are after 1 week of camp, and Dan Quinn said that some of them are still a little timid and trying not to make mistakes, but he wanted to point out the fact that they deserve to be here, and he wants them to be themselves, not overthink it. We drafted you for a reason. I know you're a rookie, you're trying to avoid mistakes, but we prefer for you to go out there and be natural, be instinctual. You may make mistakes, but at least we want you playing fast and not overthinking things, rather than doing what some of these guys are doing where they're overthinking things and being a little timid right now. Shouts out to Felix for getting that question and answered out of Dan Quinn. Also, Nikki Javala pointed out the fact that Dan Quinn said that he showed the team a clip of Roger Federer's commencement speech that was about his lessons from losses to show that things don't always go your way, even for the best of the best. Here's the quote from Federer that he referenced, again, provided by Nikki Javala. This is something that Dan Quinn wanted to get the message to through the team. I don't know if he did it yesterday or before practice today, but either way, this is the message. In tennis, perfection is impossible. In the 1,526 single matches I've played in my career, I won almost 80% of those matches. Now, I have a question for you. What percentage of points do you think I won in those matches? Only 54%. In other words, even top-ranked tennis players win barely more than half the points they play. And that's basically the message that Dan Quinn wants to get through his team. Now, before we actually get into practice, of course, we're going to start with the quarterbacks. You know, we had to start with some big energy provided in this clip by Josh Taylor. Now, this isn't the bag drills to start off practice, but it seems like there was a lot of energy from the team before practice got started. We started with a big huddle. Everybody broke off, and it seemed like everybody was excited and ready to practice. And it seems like that energy carried on throughout practice. This was not just a facade to show the fans that were attending, Josh Harris and Adam Peters and those guys that were watching the very beginning of practice or anything like that. This was not manufactured. This was real energy, because you're going to find out when we're doing these breakdowns throughout the video, offense and defense, it was one of those days where everybody was making plays. It wasn't, typically in a practice, like we always talk about, there's always this fine line of, well, if the offense is making plays, does that mean the defense is bad? And if the defense is making plays, does that mean that the offense is bad, and vice versa, and all of those type of things? Well, today it was more so, instead of both being bad or either being bad, it was more so just one getting the better of the other and just making plays simply. So this is one of those positive practices where you can feel good about both the offense and the defense. And again, it started with that energy in that clip that you just saw. Now let's get into the quarterbacks. And y'all know me, man. I'm only here to talk about Jayden Daniels. If we end up talking about another quarterback, even for a slight moment, cool. But we're here to talk about Jayden Daniels because he's our starting quarterback, and he's the only quarterback I'm expecting to ever throw a pass for us in the regular season for the next 15 plus years. At least, hopefully, ideally, glass half full situation. But Dan Quinn talked about Jayden Daniels before the practice started and said that he joked about the fact that they're gonna have to talk to the Nats and work on some sliding drills. So I don't know what's going on with Jayden Daniels there. He's not sliding as well as he preferred, or I don't know, but Dan Quinn was basically joking about it. Do not overreact, please, and thank you. But here's this clip provided by Mitch Tisler where Jayden Daniels, it's just a flick of the wrist for the guy, man. I mean, he throws deep balls with such ease. It's amazing. I believe this is Luke McCaffrey in this clip that you're about to see. And then you have Scott Abraham providing this clip here, and he's talking about how this is a fantastic rep by Jayden Daniels. He said the footwork, keeping his head up, and delivering a strike to the target. This is what you want to see from a rookie quarterback. And again, you're seeing the clip right now, and this fantastic mechanics, man. This guy is wise beyond his years. This guy is a very mature quarterback, especially for a rookie. I'm expecting us to come out guns blazing immediately this season and not have a bunch of rookie growing pains that a typical franchise has when they have this much roster turnover, coaching turnover, front office turnover, even scouting department going from a previous year to the next year. But we'll see, man. I'm very excited. I'm very optimistic, and Jayden Daniels looks like he's ready to lead us, but we got to see. And then you have this Jayden Daniels deep bomb to Michael Davis, the undrafted free agent running back. Just look at this clip here, man. It's beautiful. I mean, in stride, like Michael Wiley did not have to slow down at all. He was running full speed, and next thing you know, the ball is perfectly where it needs to be, right over his shoulder. You couldn't have thrown the ball any way better than that. Jayden Daniels couldn't have stopped time, walked down there, and handed him the ball in a better spot than where he threw that. I mean, that was pure perfection, and that was kind of like a sneak peek into what Jayden Daniels was eventually going to do once we got the team drills. Buckle up. Again, I already told you, this was Jayden Daniels' best day of training camp. We're going to get to that, to some specific plays about when he was balling out today. And then before practice like officially started, when we were still doing individual things, quarterbacks with the quarterbacks, everybody separated. But before we got to the team drills, we're doing 11 on 11s, red zone drills and things like that, that basically mostly encompass what happens in actual practice. Before we got there, Jayden Daniels and Jeff Driscoll had a pretty cool competition, and it looks like Jayden Daniels won it. Now let's get to what Jayden Daniels did in practice today. And just to let you know, he was out there with the second team today, but he balled out today. He connected on a really good deep ball to Olamide Zaccheaus at one point. Then, I mean, it was like a big gain too. Everybody was saying it was like an absolutely beautiful deep ball to him. So you had the Michael Wiley beautiful deep ball before practice. You had the one to, I'm not even exactly sure who that was earlier that I showed you, Luke McCaffrey, Dax Mills, somebody, where it was a beautiful deep ball. And then when we actually got the team drills where there was actually like a defense in front of him trying to stop him from completing these deep balls, he continued to do so. Then at a certain point, Jayden Daniels fumbled on a quarterback running back exchange. So that was like the one slight negative today. But outside of that, he balled out, because then later on, Linnell pointed out the fact that Jayden Daniels had an outstanding pass on the run to Jahan Dotson for a nice gain. And he said that Jayden Daniels has been sharp to start the practice. So he was good even before then. And then Josh Taylor even pointed out the fact that it was a dart to Jahan Dotson. Play action rollout to the right and then hit him on the sideline. Basically a perfect throw. Again, on the run, scrambling, throwing it. Beautiful. And then Josh Taylor pointed out the fact that Jayden Daniels hit Terry McLaurin on a short pass to the left and then immediately ran across the field to Terry to talk about the play afterwards when they subbed out. I love that as well. Absolutely love that. They're talking about every little thing, even a successful play. They have to talk about it over, discuss what happened, and just make sure that they get every single detail down pat. Make sure they review every little thing. Again, whether the result was good or bad, we got to make sure the process is as close to perfect as you can get, no matter what. Love that. Shouts out to Josh Taylor for that one. Then Linnell pointed out the fact that Jayden Daniels had a great deep ball to Jahan Dotson, but sadly Jahan Dotson couldn't corral that one. And Jahan Dotson had a great day today, so don't let that play take away from the fact that he had a great day overall, but he was not able to bring in that pass. It seemed like it was a fairly difficult pass, but great throw by Jayden Daniels nonetheless. Then later on, Ben Standig said that Jayden hit Terry McLaurin for like a 40-ish yard throw. Perfect. That's all he said, just perfect. Then Linnell, about the same throw, said Jayden Daniels has been on one today. Another beautiful deep ball to Terry for a big gain. It's a thing of beauty watching him throw it deep. Best practice of camp from Jayden Daniels, and this was as of 10:20 a.m. They still had like another 40 minutes of practice, and Linnell already said that Jayden Daniels having his best practice yet. And then Josh Taylor even pointed out that same exact play and said play of the day so far, and it may have ended up being the play of the day, period. Jayden with a deep left beauty to Terry McLaurin. Fans go wild, and Terry comes off the field hyped up and clapping. I love to see Terry McLaurin hype. I love to see some personality from him, because Seawall Sports even pointed out the fact that after that Jayden Daniels to Terry McLaurin pass, the real highlight was McLaurin clapping his hands on his way back to the sideline, yelling that S word money. And he just kept saying it over and over again. Extremely hype. I love the hype that I'm seeing from Terry McLaurin. And I love the fact that Terry McLaurin has a quarterback to be hype about. Let's just start there. And then also, Linnell later said that Jayden Daniels ripped one to De'Ami Brown working against Mike Sainristil in coverage. And apparently the coverage was pretty good. It was just, great offense beats good defense. That's what the nature of the game. Then John Kahn pointed out the fact that Jayden Daniels hit Terry McLaurin on another deep ball. And it was the second connection today from them, and Terry McLaurin was pumped. And then Jayden Daniels apparently in the first play of red zone drills did a QB draw for a touchdown. Shouts out to Cliff Kingsbury for dialing that up. Shouts out to the offensive line for blocking it perfectly. Shouts out to the offense selling it to where the defense had no idea it was coming. And then Jayden Daniels for executing it beautifully. Shouts out to Josh Taylor for that information. And then shouts out to Linnell for updating us on the fact that soon after that, red zone drills again, Jayden Daniels threw a touchdown to Zach Ertz. So everybody could get it. If Jayden Daniels was out there, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a big throw, you get a completion. It was beautiful. And Nikki Javali even tweeted shortly after practice that Jayden Daniels is having a very good day. That quarterback competition is really heating up. And she was basically being sarcastic and tweeted a gif of Steve Harvey making like a certain face to where, you know, it's just like, yeah, like that quarterback competition, that thing is a facade. That's not a real thing. Jayden Daniels is clearly the starter. They're having him go out there and work with the second stringers every now and then, but it's clear to see that he is the best quarterback easily on this team already. No competition. Now moving on to the running backs, you had a play where Brian Robinson had a big run up the middle, but Mike Sanford still snuck behind him and popped it out for a fumble. So, hey man, Brian Robinson, we're going to talk about Mike Sanford still when we get to the cornerback part of this video. Of course, big time got to talk about the fact that he made that play. But on the negative side, when the defense is forcing the fumble, that means our offense has to be the one fumbling. So, of course, we need to scold Brian Robinson and talk to him about ball security for sure. I know Anthony Lynn was on his head after that. Nobody reported it, but there's just no way Anthony Lynn wasn't in his face after something like that. But in the meantime, while Brian Robinson had a fumble today, Josh Taylor said that Austin Eckler had a shifty big run to the right and guys were flying around today. Again, it's just one of those days where the offense and the defense were both great. They were both getting the best of each other at times. It was just one of those days where everybody was hype. It was a lot of energy. And JP Finley even pointed out the fact that in that run, a sweet jump cut from Austin Eckler, dude seems to be on a mission this offseason. So again, apparently Austin Eckler has found the fountain of youth. Seawall Sports even brought up the fact that there were a couple of blunders on offense today, fumbles, drops, etc. But not Austin Eckler, though. He's protecting that ball with his life today. And Austin Eckler has had fumble problems previously throughout his career, but apparently he's not playing about that while he's being here for the Commanders now that he's joined us. Maybe that's something that he's really emphasized working on. And then Josh Taylor tweeted, "I'm telling y'all, I like Michael Wiley. And remember, that is the running back from earlier that caught that beautiful deep ball that I showed you from Jayden Daniels before we got in the team drills. So, hey, man, Michael Wiley may be a name that you may want to keep track of." Josh Taylor says that he's starting to pop a little bit. He's starting to take notice. We'll monitor that situation as we get further into training camp. We really start to dive into these depth chart projections and things like that. Now moving on to the wide receiver position, Seawall Sports asked Dan Quinn before practice what he's seeing so far out of the Commanders wide receiver group, and Dan Quinn said that he was basically very complimentary on what he saw and is seeing from Dyami Brown. Is he wide receiver 4? Because we haven't really heard a lot about Dyami Brown so far up to this point in training camp. Is he potentially wide receiver 4 only behind Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Luke McCaffrey? Or is he at the very least one of the better wide receivers is going to make the roster outside of that top 3? We'll see. You already know how I feel about Dyami Brown. He has some big play potential, but I mean, the main reason I like Dyami Brown is that he's arguably our best blocking wide receiver. It's between him and Terry McLaurin, and I would give the edge to Dyami Brown, and that can be huge for the run game, which is probably a main reason that if he makes a team, that's going to be why. His ability to block and seal off DBs, which will basically allow like a Jayden Daniels scramble, say maybe it would go for 5 yards if it's not Dyami Brown blocking, but because Dyami Brown is able to seal off that DB and Jayden Daniels is able to get on the outside of the defense, maybe instead of a 5-yard scramble, it turns into like a 40-yard scramble where he runs out of bounds at the last second type of situation. That's the difference that small details like that make. And so Dyami Brown's more than likely going to make the team because of that, because Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Lynn have already emphasized how much they want to run the ball really well this season. And if you're the best blocking wide receiver out of all of the wide receivers that we have competing right now, like a dozen of them, basically over a dozen of these guys competing, that's one way to stand out. That's your niche, quite likely to make the team there. And then of course he can also just start to learn how to run a better route tree, get better and more consistent hands. That's going to be big time. He must be doing something right if Dan Quinn is noticing him as a receiver, not even necessarily as a blocker. That's going to be big time. Dyami Brown, big season, breakout season on the way. We'll see. And then Remember the throw that we talked about earlier where Jayden Daniels ripped a pass to De'Ami Brown later on in practice, so he's making plays. Dan Quinn complimented him before practice started, and then during practice today, De'Ami Brown made a really nice catch from Jayden Daniels. And if you're making good catches from Jayden Daniels, your starting quarterback, that connection is more important and more useful than if you're making plays with Marcus Mariota. I mean, it's still good that you made a play, but most importantly, you need to have chemistry with the quarterback that's actually going to be out there throwing the ball to you in the regular season. So for him to be gaining some chemistry with Jayden Daniels is big time, something to definitely notice. And then also, Zach Selby pointed out the fact that Jahan Dotson looked like his old self with the grab from a comeback route near the sideline at some point today, and Terry McLaurin looked as smooth as ever today. So basically, Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin had great days today. They looked like the alpha dogs in the wide receiver room. And then you had Jahan Dotson. He even made a few more plays later than that after that play in camp today. He even had a touchdown catch on the very first play of red zone drills from Marcus Mariota. And it didn't matter basically which quarterback was throwing. Jahan Dotson was making plays, whether it was Jayden Daniels or Marcus Mariota throwing the ball. Jahan Dotson was out there for blood today. I love to hear that. Breakout season for him, really comeback season for him. And then there was a time where we mentioned earlier, Jayden Daniels dropped a dime to Olamide Zaccheaus down the right sideline, and it drew a loud roar from the crowd. So Olamide Zaccheaus is continuing to making plays. Davion Davis, who's gotten a lot of run with the first team, Zach Selby said he probably had the catch of the day, getting a leaping grab from a throw from Marcus Mariota. Then Ben Standig pointed out the fact that there were back-to-back nice grabs from Dax Milne from Sam Hartman. And he also said that not sure how Milne makes the squad, but the back of the wide receiver room is open right now, in my opinion, and it is wide open. Whoever makes the most plays is going to end up making the team. Then Ben Standig later pointed out that the receivers are making plays today, and pointed out the fact that Bryson Tremaine was the latest one to do it. A diving catch down the field from Mariota as well. And basically, John Com said that after that play that Bryson Tremaine made, basically half the offense came running on the field to celebrate afterwards. So people are acting like, at least player-wise, that was probably the play of the game. But either way, my point is, the reason I just gave you that rapid-fire run of different receivers making plays is that it sounds like, again, like I talked about in my breakdown yesterday of day 5 of practice, maybe this wide receiver depth is better than I thought. It was definitely one of my biggest concerns coming into the off-season practices, especially training camp, but it sounds like we may be in good hands. Whoever those last 3 to 4 receivers end up being that get those last 3 to 4 spots outside of the top 3 and Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Luke McCaffrey, it sounds like we can trust that they will actually be really good receivers that can contribute. But it definitely helps if you're a guy that can also contribute on special teams as like a returner, like a Casimir Allen. That's going to increase your chances of making the team, but we'll see how that goes. And then before we leave the wide receiver position, before we move on to the tight ends and then the offensive line, because we have some big updates for both of those, you had Jahan Dotson speaking to the media after practice, and I just wanted to run through these real quick because I feel like these are very notable, especially the last thing that he says about Jayden Daniels. We'll get there, but first of all, he said that he's feeling more comfortable in the offense, which is allowing him to play faster than he was the past couple of years. So that makes you really start to think, because there's always been this debate. Was it Jahan Dotson's fault? Was it Sam Howell's fault? Was the offensive line's fault? Was it Eric Bieniemy's fault? You could argue that, honestly, it was everybody that I just mentioned's fault in some way, shape, or form. It's just the only real debate is just how much of a percentage do you slice up and give to each party involved. I feel like Jahan Dotson probably deserves the least percentage, and it's starting to sound and look like that may be true with the way that he's balling out in this new offensive scheme with a better quarterback, a better offensive coordinator. It sounds like it may not have been Jahan Dotson's fault last year, and I'm excited. And again, he's even saying that the way that this offense is built and how comfortable he feels in it, he's able to play faster than he was the past couple of years, even faster than how he played in his rookie season where he flashed a lot. Remember, before he got hurt in his rookie season, at a certain point, him and Stephon Diggs were leading the NFL in receiving touchdowns, even more than all of the top receivers, even more than all of the top tight ends like Travis Kelce. Up to a certain point, it looked like he was on track to potentially have a strong case for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Then he got hurt, came back, and it seemed like him and Taylor Heineke took a while to finally get that chemistry going back, and then he ended the season on a pretty pretty high note. Then last year, everything was just, I don't even know what that was, to be completely honest. So I'm very optimistic that Jahan Dotson can bounce back. Then he also talked about how much he's been working hard to get a grasp of the new playbook, but the quarterbacks have been doing a good job, and that's been a helping hand as far as him learning the playbook a little bit quicker. So apparently this offense and this offensive playbook is so different from last year that Jahan Dotson is still working on grasping it, and I'm pretty sure he's not the only one. I'm just happy that the quarterbacks are ahead, mainly like a guy like Jayden Daniels. They're ahead right now, and they're able to help the other guys learn the playbook a little bit quicker. That's great work from the rookie. Then Jahan Dotson also said that the offense is getting to stretch the field more and more each day, and that's what the offense is about. So Cliff Kingsbury is basically doing a great job of like not feeding them too much at once. No sensory overload, no throwing too much of the playbook at them at once for them to memorize and be able to actually calculate and understand and be able to utilize and things like that, because then that could cause you to stop playing fast. Like Jahan Dotson just said, this offense is allowing him to play fast because he is more comfortable with the offense. We're gonna make sure you master these few things, then we'll throw in a couple of extra more. Then after you master all of that, we'll throw in a couple of more. I love how Cliff Kingsbury is going about installing this offense. Then Jahan Dotson talked about Jayden Daniels' ball placement. He said, quote, with him, anything is possible, unquote. And that is the highest praise you can give a quarterback, man. I know Jayden Daniels, he's been balling out. He's looked great. But to hear that, I'm pretty sure even Jayden Daniels had to be like, wow, man, these guys really respect me, even though I'm a rookie. And then to even go further into the quote, he said, quote, me, as in Jahan Dotson, and Terry, we're talking about it on the sidelines. He puts the ball in places that makes our jobs easier, putting it where only you can get it, a special talent, unquote. That is coming from Jahan Dotson. And again, Terry McLaurin apparently agreed. They are very excited because it sounds like they finally have a franchise quarterback. Long time coming for Terry McLaurin. Now moving on to the tight end position. And like we mentioned earlier, Dan Quinn specifically highlighted John Bates as one of the 5 players out of the entire team that stood out the most once the pads came on during yesterday's practice. And I'm pretty sure he continued that momentum today in today's practice. And then you have this clip of him coaching up John Bates personally one-on-one. So maybe he's pretty invested in John Bates' success for this team. And now offensive line, where things get really interesting. So before practice even started, Dan Quinn said that Washington is intentionally moving guys around the offensive line to get different looks. And I think as we see different guys at left guard, left tackle, and right tackle, we should keep that in mind. The only spots right now that are officially locked up with official starters are center and right guard. So that means that the only starters that we have so far in the O-line, and this could be kind of like a bad thing in a way, it's like we got to hurry up and figure that out as soon as possible, because like I've already talked about in several other videos, I've been talking about it for years now, chemistry is arguably the most important trait of the offensive line. That's the most important trait you can have, chemistry and camaraderie and knowing what the guy to the left and the right of you is thinking and what they're going to do as far as handling stunts and all of those type of things, picking, like making sure you assign protections, who you're going to block, all of that mental chemistry, nuance stuff is more important than anything else. Like I said, you can bring in 5 all-pros in one offseason from 5 different teams, and they can go out there week 1 and allow 5 sacks because chemistry matters that much. So we need to figure out who the starting O-line is as soon as possible. Don't rush it. Make sure you pick the right guys. Make sure you take enough time, the perfect balance to pick the right guys, but also pick it quick enough to where we can get that chemistry going so that we're not walking into week 1 looking stupid. Remember, Andrew Wiley was terrible last year, and some of that was his fault, but you notice by the second half of last season, he and Samuel Cosmi started to get their chemistry going. And then the second half of last season, Samuel Cosmi was easily the best player on our team and was literally playing at an all-pro level. And then Andrew Wiley went from being terrible and unplayable to actually pretty decent and somewhere around average, dare I even say pretty decent. So chemistry matters a lot here. But going back to my main point, that means that so far our only starters on the offensive line as of today that are officially locked in are Samuel Cosmi at right guard and Tyler Biadasz at center. But Dan Quinn did also say that Nick Allegretti is probably the closest player out of any of the other 3 spots to potentially securing his starting spot as of right now, and that would be left guard if when he does. So interior offensive line is just about wrapped up, and then it's just a full-blown competition wide open at both tackle spots right now. But as of today, it looks like Brandon Coleman could end up being your starting left tackle, and Andrew Wiley seems like he's more than likely going to hold on to that right tackle starting spot that he had last year. His chemistry with Samuel Cosmi, like I just spoke on, probably gives him a big advantage over the other right tackle candidates because of that. The famous saying, why fix something that's not broken? And I know Andrew Wiley isn't the best right tackle doing it, but that chemistry that he and Samuel Cosmi had was working, and not even just on Andrew Wiley's side, but at a certain point, Samuel Cosmi was able to trust Andrew Wiley with certain things, which allowed him to play better individually, Samuel Cosmi himself. So Andrew Wiley may be kind of like have at least somewhat of an advantage over the other tackle candidates like Trent Scott and Cornelius Lucas for the right tackle spot, just simply because he makes Samuel Cosmi better just because of the chemistry that they already have. But you could argue that if Trent Scott and Cornelius Lucas are better tackles overall, let's just go ahead and supplement those guys at right tackle and get that chemistry with Samuel Cosmi going as soon as possible. We'll see. But either way, Brandon Coleman was back out there with the first team at left tackle. This seems to be a consistent thing. This may be permanent moving forward. Dan Quinn, again, before practice said that Brandon Coleman is not the starter yet officially, but so far from what we're seeing in practices, with him being the starting left tackle for now with like 3 or 4 practices in a row, this may be a thing. This may really be a thing. So when it came to the first defensive line reps with the 11s, when you had the starters out there, you had Brandon Coleman left tackle, Nick Allegretti at left guard, Tyler Biotish at center, Samuel Cosmi at right guard, and Andrew Wiley at right tackle. To me, that sounds like what it's probably going to end up being. Ben Standig also pointed out the fact that when it was the backups, Cornelius Lucas was in at left tackle, Strongberg was in at center, Michael Dieter was in at right guard. That kind of surprises me a little bit because I would think Michael Dieter would be the backup center and then Strongberg would play guard, because Strongberg did look better at guard than center last year in the times that we did see him, especially in practices. And then Michael Dieter has been historically a better center than guard so far throughout his relatively short career as a veteran. So we'll see how this goes. Again, a lot of mix and matching going on, but I just thought that was interesting. But again, that's your starting offensive line right now. But at the same time, Brandon Coleman did allow a sack on Jayden Daniels today versus KJ Henry, and that's great news for KJ Henry. I mean, congratulations. The sooner that KJ Henry can develop into potentially becoming that guy that can start opposite of Dorrance Armstrong, the better, because just like the offensive line situation, we need Brandon Coleman to step up right now and develop, because our situation at left tackle is Cornelius Lucas is a decent pass blocker, not a good run blocker at all. Trent Scott is a good run blocker, not a good pass blocker. Brandon Coleman could potentially be good at both. Same thing with KJ Henry. Cleveland Farrell is a really good run stuffer edge setter, but not a really good pass rusher. Dante Fowler is a really good situational pass rusher, but not a good edge setter. KJ Henry has the potential to do both and be good at both. It would be huge if he could step up and develop in time to be that starter opposite of Dorrance Armstrong, so that we have a guy that can do both, and just him being on the field doesn't automatically just indicate to the opposing team what we're trying to do on defense or offense. But going back, Brandon Coleman did allow a sack to KJ Henry today, and Linnell also said that Brandon Coleman had a rough day giving up inside pressures at times. Something definitely to focus on and improve on moving forward. But then Linnell later said that in red zone drills that Brandon Coleman did a great job against Frankie Luvu and Dante Fowler. So just kind of like an up and down day for the guy. But I hear just from multiple sources that overall it was a really good day for Brandon Coleman, but it didn't come without his mistakes. But as long as you're seeing the flashes, my point is we can work with that. It's way easier to teach a player to do a good thing and flash more often, to teach them how to do that thing really well that they already do really well, and teach them how to do that more often, than to teach a guy how to do something well that they don't already do well. A guy that's decent at something, trying to teach them how to do it better is way more difficult than teaching a guy how to do something that they already do really well, just more often. So I'll take those flashes, Brandon Coleman. The sooner you're ready, the better for this team for sure. And then Linnell also said, as far as the offensive line goes, Trent Scott at one time stonewalled Frankie Luvu in a spin attempt. And basically he also pointed out the fact that with them mixing up a lot of the depth chart things, starters with backups and things like that, when Frankie Luvu has been the guy that's been on the edge at times, literally going one-on-one against tackles and team drills, Anthony Pittman has actually been the guy out there at linebacker, off-ball linebacker, inside linebacker, where Frankie Luvu normally would be. So I just thought that was pretty interesting to point out. But I did want to make sure that you knew that Trent Scott had a decent rep today. I don't know if he had a good day overall, but at one point he did a good job against Frankie Luvu, who you could argue was one of the MVPs of the day. We'll get there when we get to the linebackers. Now, before we actually go on to the actual defense, especially like individual groups of the defense positions, starting with the defensive line. I do want to point out the fact that Ben Standig said that the defense was going for the ball today. Brian Robinson, again, earlier, like we mentioned, broke open for a pretty big gain, and then Mike Sanford still came from behind and forced a fumble on it. And then at a certain point, Frankie Luvu did a great job of forcing a fumble on Zach Ertz as well. And then you also had that drop exchange from Jayden Daniels. So including that fumbled exchange between Jayden Daniels and the running backs, we had 3 fumbles for the offense before we even got halfway through practice, I believe. So the defense, again, you hear all of these great moments from the offense. You're also getting great moments from the defense. It was just overall a playmaking day, and those are the type of days you want consistently. I mean, of course, it's really hard to measure and gauge exactly how good your offense and your defense is until we start doing these joint practices, but that's like as good of an example of a day as you can get out of your offense and defense competing against each other. Now, let's move on to the defensive line. And again, like we spoke on earlier, Dan Quinn emphasized that 5 players specifically really stood out after we put the pads on. And outside of John Bates at tight end, and of course Mike Sanford still, and Casimir Allen, as far as special teams go, you had Jonathan Allen and Dorrance Armstrong on the defensive line. So I just really want to emphasize the fact that those guys are standing out with the pads on. Jonathan Allen has already been putting together really good days in practice, but then once they put the pads on, it sounded like he became even more impactful and even stood out even more compared to his peers around him. And then Mitch Tisler pointed out the fact that before the 11-on-11 periods even started today, transitioning from individual drills to where we actually started to get team drills going when practice like really actually started, Clelin Ferrell started the 11-on-11 period running over to the fans and trying to get them to be loud. So he had a very energetic day today. We're going to talk about him again soon, because he was a big source of energy today. He was one of the leaders on the field today for sure. Definitely one of the biggest hype men and sources of energy. So I know Dan Quinn Jowett Jr. loved that for sure. And then also I know Daryl Tapp loved that. And speaking of Daryl Tapp, here you see a clip of him provided by Sam Fortier. I'm about to show you the clip where Sam Fortier said that Daryl Tapp is the loudest coach on staff, at least the loudest new coach easily. And he has his guys fired up to hit all of the time. Here's the clip right here. And then, of course, any Johnny Newton updates, any clips that we get of him, I'm going to update it every time. I'm going to upload it every time for y'all to see. So you have Zach Selby here providing this one. He tweeted with the clip, Jazon Newton getting individual work today. He'll also be making his debut in 11-on-11 drills this morning. We're going to update y'all on how that went soon as well. So 11-on-11s wise, I didn't get a lot of detailed information about what Johnny Newton did today, and it's probably because he was out there with the backup. Zach Selby said that Newton was out there working with the third team. Again, Dan Quinn said as of yesterday or maybe a couple of days ago that Johnny Newton is healthy. He's good to go, but they're just trying to slowly ramp him up. So that's why even though he technically, say we had a game yesterday, he would have played in it, but they're just trying to ramp him up slowly. So they had him doing individual drills even though he was already healthy. Now, even though he's doing team drills, they're starting him with the third team. They're not going to throw him out there to the Wolves just yet. He's going to work his way up to the first team. But Zach Selby did say that while he was out there with the third team, one thing that he did show was a lot of effort. That guy is ready and hungry to show what he could do. So I'm going to give y'all more detailed updates about Johnny Newton in practice once he starts to get a little bit more attention from the reporters and the people attending those practices. I'm assuming he's probably going to have to work his way up the depth chart so that we can get that information. And then moving on, KJ Henry again had a really nice rep against Brandon Coleman like we talked about earlier. It would have been a sack on Jayden Daniels if it were a real game. And then going back to Clelin Ferrell real quick, Josh Taylor pointed out the fact that Clelin Ferrell had a play where he would have had a sack on Marcus Mariota, and then he sprinted down the field the rest of the play. And he was basically just a really fired up guy today. Like just a big ball of energy for everybody, and apparently it was infectious. And then lastly, before we leave the defensive line part of this video, apparently Jonathan Allen blew up a run play really quickly, like immediately. Shouts out to Josh Taylor for that information. Apparently he was there before the offensive line even knew what was going on. So it sounds like Jonathan Allen probably found the fountain of youth and he's ready to go. And then also, before we move on to the defensive line, after practice, Johnny Newton did speak to the media, and I felt like some of these things were some important and encouraging quotes. First of all, he said it felt really good to be back out there, and he's excited that he was just able to be out there to compete, to actually go team drills and contact with people. I know, I understand. He also said that he never really felt any discomfort in his left foot. That's really interesting. The one that was most recently surgically repaired. He went to go get his right foot checked and then found out that his left one needed surgery as well, and that was the one that he was most recently recovering from, which is really interesting. Shouts out to the doctors for pointing that out and finding that, and diagnosing that, even though Johnny Newton didn't know. And then also, Newton said that he wanted to just get his feet wet today, and since it was his first time participating in team drills, he's really excited, and he said that he feels like he'll be 100% again soon. Really excited to hear that. And then he also said that Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne have been great teammates and mentors to him. They're like big brothers with encouragement and advice that they provide him. Love hearing that from those guys. Love it. Oh, my fault. Actually, before we leave the defensive line officially, here's some clips of Jamin Davis going through some edge rusher defensive line drills as well. Can't believe I almost forgot this. And while you're looking at the clips, Mark Bullock brings up a great point while looking at the clips, and he said that Davis has little experience having to clear hands and bend the edge. Good drill for him to learn those aspects as he transitions to edge rusher. And George Carmi also pointed out the fact that Davis clearly has the speed for pursuit, but does he have the size to set the edge? He'll have to be a situational pass rusher if and when he even gets those type of reps. So if he has any chance of making his team, well, he better learn to set that edge and be able to attack that pass rusher, get to that quarterback, man. And then when we did get to team drills, it didn't sound like Jamin Davis had a good day at all. But Linnell did say that Jamin Davis had a really good rush and forced Sam Hartman out of the pocket at some point in practice today. So there's at least a flash right there, but not sure how much of a chance he has making his 53-man roster, because so far he hasn't put together good days, but we'll see. And then there was even a point in practice where Linnell pointed out that Jamin Davis got mauled by Trent Scott, and basically that the transition is still a work in progress, him going from off-ball linebacker to outside edge rusher linebacker, technically a defensive lineman. Not looking too good for him. He better pick up the pace, because that 53-man roster cut situation may not look pretty for the former first-round pick, whose fifth-year option did not get picked up for obvious reasons. Now moving on to the linebacker position. Again, Frankie Luvu had a ridiculous day today, like a future all-pro level day. Remember, you have experts out there, neutral experts, not Commanders fans, not Commanders beat writers, not Commanders media members, or nothing, out there saying that Frankie Luvu is the second best linebacker in the NFL already. And also saying that the Commanders have the best linebacker group in the NFL, even better than the Fred Warner-led 49ers that Adam Peters assembled himself. So, man, is Adam Peters just going to be responsible for the two best linebacker groups in the NFL, 1 and 2? Amazing. But either way, Frankie Luvu apparently had one of them days today. And he's put together great days consistently throughout training camp, but this was the day where he had the biggest impact and was the most noticeable, because, again, earlier, he had that peanut punch to force a fumble on Zach Ertz at one point in time. Zach Ertz made a good catch, and Frankie Luvu was there to pop it out. And then Josh Taylor even said later on that Luvu was popping today, so quick to read and react to plays. So even when he's not just forcing turnovers, he was making plays. Then Linnell pointed out the fact that Luvu had a really sick inside move to beat Andrew Wiley at one point, and it would have been a quick pressure, but shouts out to Jayden Daniels for getting out to the ball out to Terry McLaurin in the flat very quickly. And then Nikki Giovanni even said, takeaway from days 1 through 6 of Commanders camp, and this is just her main takeaway, the one takeaway that she has: Frankie Luvu is fast as S-word. So they're very excited about how impactful he's going to be for this team. And then Scott Abraham interviewed Frankie Luvu after practice today, and he had a lot of notable quotes, but the one that probably caught my attention the most was when he said, quote, "There's a lot of weapons. Everyone's kind of sleeping on us right now, and I kind of like it," unquote. So he's very high on this defense, very high on the potential of this defense, and he loves the fact that people are not noticing as far as like the national media goes. Nobody's really talking about it. He can't wait to catch people off guard and punch them in the mouth when they least expect it. And then Linnell, continuing with the monitoring of the Keandre Jones situation. This is a guy that's been flashing at linebacker the past couple of days in training camp. He pointed out the fact that former good counsel standout Keandre Jones continues to flash at linebacker for another consecutive day. It sounds like he's stacking multiple good days today, man. And I'm telling you, We already have, of course, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Luvu, and Jordan McGee as your top 3 linebackers. If we're going to keep 4, Keandre Jones is obviously that 4th linebacker from what it seems right now. We may have found a huge sleeper in him to the point that I'm actually already working on a separate video of just highlighting him alone and where he came from. He originally went to Ohio State, then he went back to Maryland to college because he's from Maryland, and just his whole journey, 2020 undrafted free agent during the whole COVID situation, so he kind of went overlooked. Now he's shining for this defense, and I'm really excited about his potential. Now moving on to cornerback. Again, like we mentioned earlier during the injury update report of this part of this video, Benjamin St-Juste participated in team drills, but then he went inside and we did not see him for the team drills. I'm pretty sure Dan Quinn is going to give some sort of an update before the next practice. I don't believe they practice tomorrow, July 31st, as in Wednesday, but I believe they do come back and start practicing Thursday, August 1st, but we'll see. I'll keep y'all updated on that. And so Linnell Willingham also pointed out the fact that with Benjamin St-Juste out for practice today, I guess it seems fairly obvious that Mike Davis would be the guy that would step up and say first team reps, even though at a certain point in practice, even when Benjamin St-Juste was healthy, Tariq Castro-Fields was the starter alongside Emmanuel Forbes. Maybe it was just in the spirit of mixing things up and see what can happen, just in the spirit of experimentation. But right now, you know for sure Mike Davis is the starting outside corner at this point, it seems like when Benjamin St-Juste is banged up, because you're never going to depend on him to play an entire season. And then next up, Dan Quinn said that Mike Sainristil is settling in as the main slot corner already. And we already knew this. Just from the fact that we drafted him in the 2nd round. And then you go look at his tape from what he did at Michigan, especially in the biggest moments, the brightest moments, national championship game and things like that. You could already assume that. But the way that he's going out there and handling himself and handling business so far in training camp, he's elite, man. Again, Chris Sims said, do not be surprised within 1 or 2 years, Mike Sainristil is literally the best slot corner in the NFL. And I've already told you what Nick Saban said, saying he was the best pound-for-pound player. Joe Klatt, all of these different media members were so excited about Mike Sainristil and feeling like he was the biggest steal in the draft, the best value draft pick, best pound-for-pound player in the draft. So there's no surprise that he's balling out so far in training camp. Linnell even says Sainristil has a chance to be one of the best slot corners in the NFL from day 1, week 1. He's been really impressive and as advertised all camp so far. This guy is hooping. And then again, just to remind you, early when we talked about Brian Robinson having that big run up the middle, and then somebody came and poked it out from behind, he snuck up behind him and got him. That was Mike Sainristil that forced that fumble. And then we had to yell and reprimand Brian Robinson for that fumble. But that's Mike Sainristil right there. He's a playmaker. He's a turnover creator. This is why they drafted him. And can we please get an official jersey number from Mike Sainristil? I don't feel like people have really noticed, or at the very least people forgot. But right now, he and De'Ami Brown are still sharing the exact same number 2 number. I just thought that was really interesting. I thought it was very strange. Can we please go ahead and handle that? And then Serge the Shooter, who gets the best pictures and snapshots at practice whenever he goes. Make sure you go follow him, subscribe to him, everything like that on Twitter. But he tweeted Mike Sainristil's stocks are up, just 6 stock up emojis. And he said that he's locking up in the slot during the red zone drills. So at a certain point in red zone drills out there with the starters, Mike Sainristil was not allowing anything to go. And I love to hear that. And then you have Emmanuel Forbes, who we've been hearing great things about every day in practice. And again, he's been going toe-to-toe with Terry McLaurin ever since training camp started, and that's huge news. We talked about yesterday and even showed you in practice how much bigger he is, stronger he is, and how he already seems much improved run game wise, but then coverage wise, which is his primary responsibility. He's been doing a really good job. Huge improvement from that going from last season to this season as well. Because even at one point today in practice, he had a great breakup on a slant from Terry McLaurin. And imagine covering Terry McLaurin on slants one-on-one. Just imagine how. First of all, try to even think of and count how many corners in the NFL can even do that. And the fact that Emmanuel Forbes is making plays against that is big time. And then also, shouts out to Scott Abraham for pointing this out, because it seems to me that Emmanuel Forbes and Jeremy Chin are definitely developing a very strong bond in that secondary right now, as you can see in this clip right here. And I'm expecting some interceptions and this exact celebration after those interceptions from these two a lot this year. I'm really excited about that. And now let's move on to the safety group. And Dan Quinn before practice said that he told defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr., talking about Quan Martin, quote, "I think he'll be one of our very best tacklers, unquote. And that is very big praise. That's your free safety right now. Your projected starting free safety. He's going to be one of the best tacklers on the team. That's typically like a free safety's biggest weakness. If Quan Martin is great at that, he looks like a future Pro Bowler in my opinion. And then also, before we leave the safety group, you know, if anybody ever uploads any footage of Tyler Owens, even if he's just doing push-ups, I'm gonna show you the clip. Shouts out to my boy Zach Selby. He's the MVP of the day just for providing this clip alone, because y'all know, again, Tyler Owens, Jeremy Chin, and Armani Rogers are probably the three players I'm most excited about as far as getting training camp updates from. Frankie Luvu and Jayden Daniels are like obvious, kind of like right there behind them, honorable mentions, but those are the three guys I want to hear from the most and see clips of. And shouts out to, again, Zach Selby for providing this clip right here where he was just working with the safeties and individual drills. Remember, he got an interception recently, so this guy's starting to make noise. And Logan Paulson even said before training camp started that Tyler Owens has been standing out in special teams. So this is a guy that not only is a freak athlete and the most athletic player on our entire team, and arguably the most athletic player in the entire NFL, I'm telling you, absolute alien, but then he's also standing out in special teams, and he's even making plays on defense, even though he's out there with the backups. That's big time. Now let's move on to special teams. And before practice even started, again, the 5 people that Dan Quinn emphasized: John Bates, since the pads came on for offense; Dorrance Armstrong Jr. and Jonathan Allen, since the pads came on defense; and then also Mike Sanverstill and Casimir Allen, since the pads came on for special teams, as far as the kick return role goes. So that sounds like if we had to do a depth chart today, those are potentially your starting 2 kick returners. But I'm not sure if you would have put Mike Sanverstill in those situations. I think he has the skill set to be a great kick returner because, again, mind you, I've said this multiple times. I even talked about this in this breakdown video, like over 40 minutes long when we drafted him, but he used to be a wide receiver. He just switched to corner 2 years ago, which is just hard to believe with how instinctual and how high his IQ is as a slot corner, run fits, all of that type of stuff, coverage, zone coverage, man coverage, leverage, and things like that. He's so nuanced, you would just never think that he just switched to the cornerback position 2 years ago, but he used to be a receiver. So that's why he has such great return ability. He's very fast, he's very quick, extremely athletic. And so Sanverstill obviously is a roster lock, but then when it comes to Casimir Allen, who's really fighting to make this 53-man roster, that's big news for him. He could end up being one of the receivers that gets one of those last 3 or 4 spots outside of the top 3 guys. If we keep 6 or 7 guys, Casimir Allen may be on track to make the 53-man roster just because of his return ability alone. If Dan Quinn is emphasizing the fact that he and Mike Sanverstill stuck out the most out of all of the guys returning, then that's big news because it's a lot of guys returning right now. Again, today is part of the rotation. Shouts out to Josh Taylor for reporting this. When it came to punts and kick returns, you had Jahan Dotson, Emmanuel Forbes, Mike Sanverstill, Dax Milne, Jamison Crowder, of course. Austin Eckler has been thrown in there recently the past couple of practices, Casimir Allen, and Demir Byrd. If you're one of the 2 guys standing out of that whole group of people, that's big news for your implications of potentially making this team. And shouts out to Craig Hoffman for pointing this out because I completely agree. This could be huge roster implications if Sanverstill can lock down return duties because they're tight on spots right now. The more one guy can do as far as multiple jobs, the better, because that can allow you to keep roster spots open for other people. If Mike Sanverstill is that good at kick returning, and then Casimir Allen can handle kick return and punt return, then that means you don't necessarily have to keep a Demir Byrd or even a Jamison Crowder or a Dax Milne. You can use those roster spots on other positions because you have guys that can contribute on defense and offense that can also contribute on special teams. You're not just keeping a roster spot specifically for a guy that only returns. That definitely hurts your 53-man roster construction, but we'll see. And just to remind y'all, I feel like a lot of people, this may have went over y'all heads, maybe y'all forgot, but just to re-update y'all, shouts out to Sam Fallon for tweeting this earlier today. Well, yesterday actually, with the new kickoff rules, NFL kickoff rules. Onside kicks are illegal before the 4th quarter. Teams also must be losing to even attempt an onside kick. And then on top of that, teams must announce intention to kick an onside kick before they actually do it as well. So there's no such thing as catching a team off guard, basically, when it comes to onside kicks. Shouts out to Dave Scarangella on Twitter for quote tweeting this because I completely agree. He said this is basically like a runner in baseball having to announce their intention to steal second. The element of surprise is the key element to even doing an onside kick in the first place. This is not only trying to fix something that's not broken, but it's also breaking something that isn't broken. And I completely agree. They just basically got rid of the whole onside kick game. Onside kicks are cooked. If you're losing in the fourth quarter and there's not much time left, you might as well just go ahead and forfeit at this point. It's taking away the excitement of the game. Really interesting. And then also shouts out to these guys, because y'all know whenever I can, some people like to provide like basically like a full breakdown of their biggest takeaways from practice after practice. You have Ben Standig, you have Josh Taylor, Mason Kinahan, and Commander's Realm with some really interesting breakdowns about what's going on so far in camp and what happened overall today in practice. Starting with Ben Standig, he tweeted, "Practice is over. Easily the most fun practice of camp, and from what I'm hearing and seeing, it sounds like most people would agree, if not everybody. That happens when plays are made, particularly by the offense. Jayden was sharp. Jahan caught a bunch of targets with a couple of misses. Tremaine popped. I love hearing that. He's our only tall receiver, 6'5". Sanford still shined in coverage and had hustle plays, and he thought that Brandon Coleman looked good overall." Then moving on, you have Josh Taylor. He said, "I've seen improvement from this team every day at practice that he's been going. Hands down, Jayden's best day so far. He missed one deep ball to Terry that would have made it a perfect day, but he was in stride today. Well-balanced day with good things from both the offense and the defense." Then you have Mason Kinahan. He tweeted, "I think it's great how after a pretty bad practice yesterday, the offense and Jayden Daniels were able to bounce back with their best performance of training camp to date. Jayden's ability to bounce back will be crucial at the beginning of his career, and early signs are very promising." I completely agree, because there may be some bumps in the road, there may be some growing pains, and if he can take a hit to the chin and basically get up from when he's doing poorly and bounce back like as if nothing happened, that's going to be big time for our early success this season. Again, I just want to make sure you follow Ben Standig, you follow Josh Taylor, and you follow Mason Kinahan for those breakdowns, because they've been attending practice, paying a lot of attention to it, and I want to make sure y'all follow those guys on Twitter and subscribe to the YouTube channels and check out their articles on their respective websites as well. And then lastly, you have at Commander's Realm. Make sure you follow him on Twitter as well. Eric Sully, he said, "Through 6 days of camp, here are some of the key takeaways that have stood out to me." And I don't necessarily 100% agree with all of these takeaways, but I'm going to give you what he said. He said, "Jamin Davis has struggled so far as an edge rusher and hasn't been used at linebacker at all." Completely spot on. Not looking good for him as far as making the final 53-man roster. Jayden Daniels has looked poised and has shown improvement each day. Completely agree. No receiver after Terry has really stood out yet, even though I would push back on that. He said even Dotson included hasn't really stood out. Sounds like Crowder has maybe been the second most flashy of the group. I haven't necessarily heard that, but again, I haven't been able to attend the practice, so I'm giving you all the information that I have, so maybe he has different sources telling him something different. Emmanuel Forbes has held his own for the most part. Nothing great yet, but he hasn't been cooked. Okay, that's fairly positive, even though I've been hearing more positive reviews than that, but we'll see. Forrest looks like he's buried on the depth chart. I have been hearing that. I can agree with that. Jeff Driscoll has impressed just as much, if not more, than Marcus Mariota. That's very interesting. Frankie Luvu is a beast. Completely agree wholeheartedly. I feel like that's an undersell, if anything. The offensive line is still very much a mix and match situation on the left side, of course, even though it seems like Brandon Coleman starting to stack days at starting left tackle. And then haven't heard or seen much from Benjamin St-Juste, but that may be a good thing, and I agree. The less you hear about Benjamin St-Juste, the better, because that means that he's hooping and locking people up, and we're not having to hear his name called much about him getting beat on routes and things like that. And then before we get up out of here, shouts out to Reedy and Z. They're doing a great job of covering the practices, and I don't want to like upload their clip and steal their footage, because they like upload their own footage themselves and things like that. But they basically pointed out the fact that Jayden Daniels stayed after practice to get some extra work with the receivers. And so even after the day that he just had, where we talked about this was his best day of the entire offseason, at the very least the best day he's had of training camp, he still stayed late after practice to work with the receivers some more. I mean, he's just a different type of guy. He's, first of all, already one of the first 3 people to get to practice every day, and he's also one of the last to leave every day. So this is the type of the work ethic you want from your starting rookie quarterback, especially. Great things ahead, man. A bright future, I'm telling you. And then lastly, Terry McLaurin, Sam 48 tweeted that Terry McLaurin's practice autograph sessions are marathons. This is the third day in a row he's gone 30 plus minutes staying after practice, just signing things for fans and saying hello and talking to them and things like that. That is your face of the franchise. We started the video early on with Terry McLaurin showing you why he's the face of the franchise. Then we also end the video with the same thing, because I think he's the only one going to this extent when it comes to that. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in the video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, man. I really appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all stay tuned for all of the content. I cannot wait till we get to the preseason, because y'all know I'm a live stream every single game. And I'm getting ahead of myself even before the preseason. How about these joint practices that we're going to have with the Jets and the Dolphins? I can't wait for those as well, because again, it's really hard to exactly gauge how good the offense is or the defense, because when the offense is making good plays and standing out in a positive way, you're looking at the defense like, well, you're allowing that. So what does that mean? What does that show about you? I can't wait for us to match up against first of all, just other teams in general, but other great teams. Jets look like potential Pro Bowl contenders. The Dolphins are obviously Pro Bowl contenders as well. If we look good against them, special teams even, but especially offense and defense, that truly means something, because we were hyped about the Commanders last year off season, and of course it was always like a cautious optimism, and then we went against the Ravens and certain individuals looked better than we expected, but overall the team, we got smacked against the Ravens in joint practices last year. So if we can go up and look good against the Jets and the Dolphins, that's really going to mean something. So make sure y'all stay tuned, because of course I will break down those joint practices just like I did today with all of these training camp practices that I've y'all covered on. I'm coming to y'all with constant updates and consistent content. Even like tomorrow, I believe they don't practice. I still have at least a couple of videos that I want to get to y'all. At least one video that I have in mind of a great video idea for y'all to watch. So every day, even when they don't practice, I got y'all covered. Make sure you do not leave this video without leaving a like. And of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything, every single little thing we discussed in this video. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my points. Do you feel like I'm way too optimistic about this team, that I have too high of hopes already? Am I jumping the gun? Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. I really appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all stay tuned for a video tomorrow, even if they don't practice. I'm gonna catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.